Hey, good morning everyone, it's me RP. Today's video was supposed to actually be about the COE situation in Singapore, the motorcycle COE situation in Singapore, because it's gotten very bad. But as you see, I'm out here on riding my bike off-road, and I wanted to change the subject because, as many of you should know by now, if you ride off-road or are planning to go off-road, anybody with half a brain would tell you that it is always recommended that you ride off in the trails in, at the very bare minimum, a pair, preferably a group, of course. And that's because if you are out in the trail all by yourself, like I am, and you get into trouble, well, first of all, if it's a mechanical problem, a tow truck is going to be very hard to reach you. And if it's a medical emergency, like you fell, you hit yourself in the head, an ambulance is also going to be very hard to reach you, if you can even walk, that is. And of course, there's a whole problem that out on the trails, usually you're in a space where it's rarely people do cross these areas, and so if anything happens to you, well, the chances of you being found quickly and being treated early is quite slim. I just fell a bit further down the road, further down the trail, and okay, it wasn't really a bit. I actually fell quite early in the trail, and I hoofed it all the way as close as I could to the exit before I started making this video, because at least right here it's easy for me to relax and rest my foot. I fell off, well, it wasn't a really bad crash. I think I hit my head, but thankfully my fall wasn't that bad. I think it wasn't that severe, because I don't see any scratches on the helmet itself on the side where I fell on. And I just broke an indicator, and there was a bit of scratch pain, but otherwise it was a very lucky fall, because I literally got bucked off as I was trying to go up the slope. So yeah, you know, when you go up a slope and then you lose traction at the back, and then it gains traction, and then you just get flipped over. Thankfully, it wasn't that bad. That's what happened to me. And now I just want to tell you guys that if you ride alone like I do, because you have no friends like I do that's interested in off-road riding, then you have to protect yourself. So here's a few tips I would like to go through. First of all, it's kind of a no-brainer. Ride within your limits, or well within your limits. If you are comfortable going, say, if you look at probably a gravel road, and you are comfortable going, say, 50-60 km per hour on that particular track, that particular terrain, try to keep it maybe like below 40 or below 30. So usually around this trail, I'm pretty comfortable. It's mostly gravel, light sand, some sections of dried mud, and very thin wet mud. So usually most of these sections I'm pretty comfortable going about 50 kilometers per hour on it. And technically I should really be going a bit slower than that, but you know, I went full out on that little bump, and I got bucked off. And if I was unlucky enough that the injury was severe, I would be in deep trouble, because today is a Sunday. Nobody uses these trails. Generally, the trails are used by maintenance workers that only come in on the weekdays, and if I had actually hit my head and been concussed, nobody would find me here until Monday, tomorrow, and I'd probably be dead by then. So that's number one. Try to always ride well within your limits. The second thing is, always remember to ride something as light as possible. If you have hard cases, switch them to soft cases. Take off as much weight as you can on a bike, because why? Even if there was no mechanical issue with the bike, you could still ride it. It will be easier to pick it up. Usually on the trails, if you ride people that go on trails with R1200 GSs, they go in groups. Why? Because once you drop the damn thing, it's really difficult to get it up all by yourself. But with a light bike, it's easier. And if there is a mechanical problem, as long as you can walk, you can push it out of the trails all by yourself, and actually be able to call a tow truck to get the bike home for you. Another important thing to remember is that protection is always very important. A lot of people that go off-road, I see, if they go in groups and they're riding dirt bikes, they have a jersey. They don't really wear armor a lot. Some groups don't bother wearing armor. But if you're alone, that's out of the question. As a solo rider, okay, if you're careful enough, I mean as a group rider, if you're careful enough, maybe wearing armor is kind of unnecessary. If you like peter around on a very flat trail at 20k an hour, is kind of a non-issue sometimes. But in my opinion, I'm riding a relatively flat trail and I would not skimp on armor. And the most important thing is you must always get gear, especially my jacket over here. This has C1 and levels 1 and 2 armor. Always have these pieces on at least the chest and the elbows and shoulders. They are very important. Having a very good solid boot when riding off-road is very important, because the chances of you having it pinned under your bike is very high. On the road, it's not a real necessity. Nice to have, but not a necessity, because the chances of you falling on a tarmac road is quite low. But here, no matter how careful you can be, there's always that risk. It's a 50-50% risk. So always having the armor is good. The other thing about the equipment you wear is that it also has to be light. If you are living in a colder climate, okay, that's a non-issue generally. But if you are from Southeast Asia like I am, I'm from Singapore, we are in a tropical climate where it's humid, it's hot during the day. Heat stroke is something that is very important to control. Always remember, bring a lot of water to cool yourself down, and always remember to get jackets that are light. For example, my jacket is armored, but there's only a single layer of textile over it. It's not thick. Generally on the road, I wear a thicker textile jacket, because when you're on the road, you will slide and it will start abrading past that one layer. But out here, generally once you hit the ground, you just roll over and you stop. There's not much issue of abrasion, you know, going past your jacket. So carry something that is light on your body, that's breathable, keeps you cool as much as possible. Because why? Once heat stroke or heat fatigue sets in, it kind of messes with your ability to make decisions, your ability to focus on the trail, and that just makes the possibility of accidents higher in the case that you are on a place that's unfamiliar to you. And that brings me to another point. Always walk the trail that you will eventually be riding on. Okay? Yes, the trail may have been used by other riders before. They may have said, yeah, it's a flat trail, it's easy, it's just mostly light gravel, hard pack, it's not an issue. But if you've never been to a trail, always remember to walk the trail as much as you can. Okay, if you can't really walk that far, I mean, some trails can stretch on for quite a few hundred kilometers if you are overseas. Over in Singapore, most of our trails stop at about 20 to 30 kilometers, and that's about it. But if you are able to walk, say, the first 1 kilometer to get a feel of what is coming up next for the next 10 kilometers or so, do it. Because the first 1 kilometer might not be descriptive of the entire trail in general, but it should give you a good idea. You walk, you feel how the ground feels. Is it loose? Is it hard? Is it wet? Or is it dry? And that will give you a good idea as to how your tires will hold up on this trail. I've done this trail multiple times, so I am very confident on it. But even so, when you are confident in a trail, you know, trails are always outdoors. Weather patterns change, it rains, water evaporates, conditions change. So even if you are pretty confident on a trail, and you don't need to walk it, it tends to pay to go a bit slow at the start, one round before you make a turn, and then you go a bit faster. In this sense, this is one mistake that I did. I went in all guns blazing, thinking that I was very familiar with this trail, and I hit a rather loose spot and that I didn't expect, and things happen. Now the other thing is, I did say take off as much luggage as you can, take off as much weight as you can off the bike, because a light bike makes it easier for you to carry it out all by yourself. But at the same time, you have to be very prepared for any eventualities. So out on the trail, it's going to be very hard to get your bike repaired. It's always important to bring a first aid kit if you have. If not a full first aid kit, at least bandages, antiseptic, disinfectant, and a few plasters for the occasional scrapes and cuts, the minor bruises. If you can carry a couple of proper splints, that would be great as well. But usually, depending on the environment, it's not necessary, because you can just pull off a couple of branches from, like, behind me. I can pull off a couple of branches if I need to make a makeshift splint. Of course, if I need a splint, it mostly means I can't ride. But sometimes if I had a bandage and I have a splint and I tie it up, I brace it enough, I can just gingerly, hobble my bike back on first gear at under 10 km an hour to the nearest spot where I can seek help. And of course, you don't just need the first aid equipment for yourself, but you might also need the first aid equipment for your bike. So generally, if you are riding a tubeless setup, for me, I decided to change it to tubeless. That is going to be one point I'll talk about. But if you are riding a tube setup, always try to at least bring a two spare pair of tubes, a patch kit, and a hand pump if you can fit one into your luggage. On top of that, a simple toolkit, okay, spare spanners, tire levers, and all that. That would be generally good. Most things on the bike, when you drop or you fall and they break off, it's not an issue. All you really need are things like a torque wrench and some spanners, screwdrivers, just to unscrew the part and then push it back into place. The parts that usually get damaged and actually needs replacement is usually on the tires. If it's something that has to do with the drivetrain or the engine, then there's no point bringing any tools or spare parts for them, because they're shit out of luck. There's no way most people can do any repairs to them by the roadside. But if you do have space for spare chain, I think that is one thing that you can bring along as well. Most people can definitely do a chain replacement by the roadside if you are technically inclined. And that's pretty much about all you really need at the very minimum. If you can bring more, it's always great. But it's a bad idea to bring any less than that, because you will eventually more or less need it. My last point is, if you're riding an adventure bike, most of you will have a spoked tire. Spoke to wheel. Okay, if you ride something like a KTM 390 Adventure, the ones with the mag wheels, the cast alloy wheels, those are generally tubeless ready, but this is not, unless you get something like the Pan America or the R1200 GS. I know they are tubeless ready even though they are spoked, because they are spoked outside the rim. But on low-end models like this and on most dirt bikes, the spokes go through the rim and you need to make them tubeless ready. And I highly recommend to anybody that intends to ride these bikes to seriously consider making them tubeless ready, because number one, it allows you to run lower pressures for extra adhesion to soft ground, conform to the soft terrain. On top of that, tubeless, when you suffer a puncture, they generally lose their air a lot slower than a tube tire. So like 2 weeks ago, I had my GP210 with tubes on it punctured, and straight away I lost all tire pressure in the middle of fucking nowhere, and I had to call. Luckily I was out of the trail by then. I had to call the tow truck. But if I had been running tubeless, as I have done many times on my various road bikes, my ZX-6R, when I had a puncture, I didn't even notice it until a week later. So if you can catch it early, you see it early, you can still ride the... Oh, there's another rider. You can still... Okay, so we've got another rider there. So, as I was saying, tubeless is very good. Why? Other than being able to run lower pressures and being able to allow you to ride a punctured tire out of the trail before you totally lose your air, it's also the easiest thing to patch by the side of the road if you have a real tire patch kit, like the tire worms. Always bring tire worms if you run tubeless, because those will straight away put you back in action, and you never need to replace your tube or have it brought to a workshop to get it fixed. And it makes it so much easier for you as a trail rider. The last and probably most important thing I forgot to mention is that if you are ever riding alone on the trails off-road, especially in places where there are very little foot traffic or people that are able to chance upon you accidentally, it is always important to notify your next of kin, your family, somebody close to you about where you are riding, when you are riding, the path you are taking, and then of course to make sure that if you do not return by a specific time, that they should come and look for you. Because a lot of times people do go out ride alone and nobody knows where they are, and it becomes an issue when they injure themselves and are unable to get out by themselves. So these are all my tips to make it a more safer, enjoyable experience if you're riding off-road outdoors all by yourself without a friend. And I think that's about it. I'm going to talk about the COE topic maybe next week or in my next video, probably at home or somewhere else instead of the trail. But if you like this video, do remember to give me a like and subscribe, hit the bell notification, the whole doodah, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.